Hey everyone, welcome to insightswithrish. In today's video, I'm going to talk about CycleGAN, which stands for Cycle Consistent Generative Adversarial Network. And for understanding this video, we are going to prominently use two resources. The first one is this research paper, and the second one here is this presentation that I have made out of that research paper. In this presentation, I have just included some important points that we need to understand from that entire research paper. Although the entire research paper here has great importance, but still there are some important points that I have extracted from this research paper which will help us to analyze this CycleGAN in a more broader perspective. So starting with, first we need to understand the basic intuition of the CycleGAN, and let me explain you that with the help of this research paper itself. So for basic understanding, or for the base theme of the CycleGAN, you need to understand this figure here, which is this figure A. So take a look at this figure A, and here you see you have two different domains. Consider this X and Y as two individual domains. The X is your first domain and the Y is your second domain. Here we have two generators. The first one is G and the second one is F. These two are the generators. And you also have two discriminators as well. The first discriminator is dx and the second discriminator here is dy. Now try to understand the role of every component here. So let's say the domain X has some n number of images. With the help of the generator G, we try to generate new images out of this X. So this X is a kind of training data to our generator, and with the help of that, the generator will generate new images. Here we are making use of this generator G. So with the help of this training data X, the generator G generates some images which are labeled as G of X. So this is how you basically write them. G of X is the output of generator G that has been generated out of the training data X. And what we want is this G of X should look exactly similar, or at least approximately similar, to the images present in this domain Y. I will try to explain you all this stuff with the help of example as well, but try to understand these technical terms first. So what we are doing is we are having two domains here, X and Y. With the help of generator G, we are trying to generate new images out of the training distribution data X that looks exactly or approximately similar to images that are present in domain Y. Now, after doing that, what will happen is this discriminator D of Y will help you identify or distinguish between the original images of Y and the generated images of Y from generator G. So this G of X is the output of generator G that has been generated from the training data X. So this dy generator will help us distinguish between the original Y images and the output of generator G. Now once you do that, with the help of this generator F, you will again try to generate new images out of the domain Y that looks exactly similar as the original domain X. So basically, first we are mapping X onto Y with the help of generator G, and secondly we are trying to map Y onto X with the help of generator F. And then this discriminator D of X help us to distinguish between the original X images and the images generated through the generator F. Now the output of this generator F looks something like this. So F, then for input, this F takes the images generated by generator G. So this G of X is the input data to our generator F. So this is how the output of generator F looks like. And the purpose of this discriminator dx is to distinguish between the original domain images of X and between this output of generator F. So this is what the CycleGAN does, and as it is doing this in a cyclic pattern where it is performing mapping as well as inverse mapping, hence this is called as CycleGAN. Now to understand this more clearly, let's take a look at our presentation. So just a minute. So this is an example. Here the horse is our domain X. So this horse is nothing but our domain X images, and zebra is our domain Y images. So firstly, we are performing mapping. We are trying to generate the images of zebra out of horse. So we basically try to map the pattern that we find on the body of zebra onto the body of horse. So these zebra images are not original but generated out of the horse training data. Once you do that, then you perform inverse mapping. You again try to convert this fake zebra images into the horse images. And there is some significance of this inverse mapping, which I will let you know in the later part of the video. But for now, just keep in mind that we are performing mapping where we try to map the images of domain X onto domain Y, and after doing that we again perform inverse mapping where we try to map the generated images again back to its original form. So this is the purpose of CycleGAN. So moving ahead now, the thing that you are performing in the forward direction, which is mapping, that is also called as forward cycle. And when you take your zebra images and try to map them back to the horse images, that is called as backward cycle, or we can say inverse mapping. Now try to understand it in the terms of research paper. So as I said previously, the generator G helps us to perform forward mapping and the generator F helps us to perform inverse mapping. And the same thing I have even shown here. Here the generator G helps us to perform forward mapping, whereas the generator F helps us to perform inverse mapping. So as you can see, the generator G is mapping the image of horse onto zebra, and after that the generator F is again mapping the images of Y onto horse. That was for forward cycle. And in the backward cycle, you have zebra images in the domain X where you try to map this zebra images onto horse and then the horse images back to zebra in the inverse mapping. That is entirely a backward cycle, and this right now that you are seeing on your screen is a forward cycle. Now moving ahead, just a minute. So moving ahead, if you just see here, this discriminator dy is helping us to identify or distinguish between the original images and the fake images, as well as the generator d of x is also doing the same task. So what are the significance of both these discriminators here? Now as you know, the generator G is helping us to perform forward mapping from domain X to domain Y. Now once you perform this mapping, that is once you generate the images of zebra out of the horse training data distribution, then the discriminator d of y will try to distinguish between the original X images and the generated images by generator G. So basically, consider that you have domain X here, which consists of images of horse. Then there is another domain which is Y, that consists of images of zebra, and the generator G generates some images of zebra out of the images of horses. So the output of generator G is something like this, G of X. Particularly this right now, the image of zebra that you see on your screen is your G of X, that is the output of generator, which is the mapping of domain X onto domain Y. So this G of X is the images of zebra generated by the generator from the horse training data, and this Y is the domain Y, which consists of actual zebra images. So the role of this discriminator dy here is to identify whether the image that the discriminator dy is receiving belongs to the original data distribution of zebra, that is Y, or it is generated by the generator G. So we have to improve our generator in such a way that dy finds it, that is the discriminator dy finds it difficult or to distinguish between the original data distribution and the generated images. Similarly, the discriminator dx also does the same task. Now in the inverse mapping, where the generator f is helping to reconstruct the original image out of the output of generator G, what this discriminator dx does is try to distinguish between the original data distribution of domain X, comparing it with the output of generator f. By that, what I mean is, now as you know, you have domain X here, which consists of original images of horse. Now with the help of generator G, you generate some images of zebra, that is some images of domain Y, out of the domain X. That is, you take domain X, which consists of images of horses, as your input, and you try to map it onto domain Y to generate the images of zebra out of that, and the output of generator G is symbolized as G of X. Now what this generator f does is it tries to map this zebra image back to its original form, which was of horse. So the output of generator f looks like f, which is the generator f. Then it takes the output of generator G as input, so f of G of X. This is how the output of generator F looks like. Now what is the role of discriminator dx here is, it tries to compare this original data domain X that consists of images of horses with this output of generator F, which is also the images of horses that are generated out of the zebra images, which we also generated from the horse images. So this f of g of x, that is the output of generator F, this horse images and the original horse images, these are the two types of images that the discriminator dx tries to compare. And depending upon that, we try to improve our generator in such a way that these images should be actually indistinguishable for discriminator dx. So I hope you got the idea or the basic intuition of this CycleGAN, and that is the generator G is trying to map the domain X onto domain Y, whereas the generator F is trying to map the domain Y back to its original domain X. The discriminator dy tries to compare the original images from data distribution of domain Y with the output of generator G, and the discriminator dx tries to compare the images from original domain A with the output of generator F. So this was the basic underlying theme of CycleGAN. Now coming to the second part is, why are we performing this inverse mapping? Like, it's fine that we are constructing the images of zebra out of horses, that is, it's fine that we are mapping the domain X onto domain Y, but why are we reconstructing the original image here? So we are mapping the domain X onto domain Y, which is fine, but what's the purpose or what's the need of mapping the domain Y back to the domain X? To understand this, we again need to go to research papers, so just a minute. Now going to this research paper here we have a figure 2. So this is the figure 2 that we have here. Now take a look at left hand side picture. So this left hand side picture demonstrates paired input data, whereas the right hand side image demonstrates unpaired image data. Now in CycleGAN, we make use of this unpaired image data. We don't have paired image data. That is, we basically can make use of paired data, but it is very difficult to find paired input data, and hence we make use of unpaired input data. So when you have paired input data, let's first talk about paired input data here. So just a minute. Now in this paired input data, you have two components, or we can say two elements, xi and yi. Yi is the corresponding image to xi. We can consider it as a kind of supervised learning, where we have some input data and we make predictions, and then we try to compare that predictions with the target data, because in supervised learning we do have a target column. Similar way, in the paired data also we have a target column. So this yi is the target column for xi. So when you generate this images xi, you try to compare it with the target images yi, and depending upon that comparison, we try to evaluate our model. As you know, that we perform evaluation based upon the comparison of predicted values and the target values. But in unpaired data, we don't have a target column. Unpaired data is a kind of unsupervised learning, where we just have the input data, but we don't have any target column there to match our predictions with. So this domain X is an individual domain X, and Y is an individual domain Y. There is no relation between the domain X and domain Y, unlike the paired input data. So here, when we are mapping this X onto Y, how can we evaluate our model? As we don't have anything to compare our output with, like what comparison should we make in order to evaluate our model's performance, like how good it is generating the images. So what we do is, we try to generate the images from the original data domain, that is, we try to map X onto Y, and once we do that, we again perform inverse mapping to reconstruct the original image, and then we compare both these images, that is the original image and the reconstructed image, to evaluate our model's performance. Let me show you an example of that. We even have that example in this research paper here, somewhere down. Just a minute. So here is an example of that. So this is an example here, if you can see. Now you might notice that we have input X here. From that, we map it onto another domain. Let's say this input X was the original images and the domain Y was Van Gogh images. You might know how the Van Gogh artistic style looks like. So we are mapping these original images with a twist of Van Gogh artistic style, and that is the output of our generator G, which is present here. Output of generator G, that is G of X. Now what we do, we again try to reconstruct the original image with the help of generator F. So here you can see reconstruction and the output of generator F, that is F of G of X. After doing that, after the reconstruction phase, what we do is we try to compare this reconstructed image with the original image. So we try to compare this original image with the reconstructed image, and then we try to evaluate our model's performance. The main goal of CycleGAN is to make both these images, that is the original image and the reconstructed image, indistinguishable from each other, which means the model is performing really well. But here you can see there are slight differences in the original image and the reconstructed image, and those are, if you take a look at your original input image here, the flowers are red, whereas in the reconstructed image the flowers are yellow. Similarly, in the original image, the woman here or a person here has a red t-shirt, whereas in the reconstructed image it's yellow. So basically what is happening is, in the reconstruction phase, the color red is getting replaced with the yellow one. Similarly, there are also some other color changes here in the input and the reconstructed image. So that's the main goal of CycleGAN, to minimize the differences between the original image and the reconstructed image in order to make them indistinguishable for discriminators dx and dy. So I hope you might have understand the need of inverse mapping here, because we don't have paired data here, and hence we want to make some kind of comparison to evaluate our model, and hence we are performing this inverse mapping here. Now going to the further part of the presentation, let me just take you to the further part here. So I have already explained you this image, and I hope that you might have understand this very well. So here we have two mapping functions, as you might know, that G, generator G, which is mapping X onto Y, and the generator F, which is mapping Y onto X, and this is the cyclic pattern that is getting generated. Now moving ahead, we have already discussed this image in the beginning of the video. The next part is also a very important part of this CycleGAN concept, and that is the losses in CycleGAN. Here we make use of two different kinds of losses. The first one being adversarial losses, that's a typical loss that we found in generative adversarial networks, and the second one is cycle consistency loss, which is specially designed for the CycleGAN. So let's try to understand the purpose of both these losses here. First, we will start with adversarial loss, which is typically found in any type of GAN. Now you might or might not be familiar with adversarial loss, and let me take you to that first. So adversarial loss ensures that the generator produces images that look realistic in the target domain. Now let's try to understand the statement here. So as you know, horse is your domain X and zebra is your domain Y. Now what you are doing is, with the help of generator G, you are generating this images of horses. So let's say you had this original horse images here. Fine. Out of this original horse images, which belongs to domain X, you generated some fake zebra images with the help of generator G. So the output of generator G is G of X, which are some fake images of zebras that you have generated out of the data distribution of domain X. Now you also have another domain here, which is domain Y, in which you have real images of zebras. So let me make it more clear here, just a minute. This X, domain X, consists of all realistic images of horse, whereas this domain Y consists of realistic images of zebras. Now this G of X is the generator that is producing fake images of zebra out of the training data distribution of domain X. That is, it is taking the images of horse, trying to map it onto domain Y and produce some fake zebra images. So now the discriminator dy here, so let me just write dy. This discriminator dy tries to distinguish between the original images of zebra and the fake images of zebra, which is an output of generator G. Now here comes adversarial loss into picture. So the adversarial loss helps us to distinguish between the original images from a domain and the generated images. Depending upon this adversarial loss, we try to improve our generator to generate more realistic images where the discriminator is actually not able to distinguish between both the real and fake images. So the adversarial loss helps us to compare the original image with the generated image that is done by the discriminator. So whenever a discriminator is trying to compare or try to distinguish between the original images and the fake images, there we use the adversarial loss. So this was about the forward cycle. In the backward cycle, we have originally zebra images. We tried to generate the images of horses out of those. Then we try to compare those generated images with the original horse images, and there the discriminator dx comes into picture. Again, there it makes use of adversarial loss. Fine. So this is the role of adversarial loss, to compare the real and fake images with the help of a discriminator. Now moving ahead, let's try to understand the importance of very important concept of CycleGAN, and that is cycle consistency. Cycle consistency loss ensures that the translation from one domain to another and back again does not distort the original image. So let's try to understand this statement also. Now domain X consists the image of your horse, that is the original image. Then with the help of generator G, you generate the images of zebras out of horse. So this is the output of your generator G, which is G of X. Now what you do, you again try to perform inverse mapping. Again with the help of generator F, you try to reconstruct the original horse image, and the output of the generator F is X hat. So it can also be written as F of G of X. Fine. So either you can write it as F of G of X, or you can say it as X hat. Now as I said previously, in this unpaired image set, we try to reconstruct the image so that we can compare it with the original image. So this X is the original image of horse from domain X, and this image X hat is the generated image with the help of generator F, or we can say reconstructed image with the help of generator F. Now to evaluate the model's performance, or to analyze how well our model is performing, we try to compare the reconstructed image with the original image. So as you can see here, X is your original image and X hat is your reconstructed image. And the main goal of your CycleGAN is that the reconstructed image should be exactly equal to the original image, or at least approximately similar to the original image. Fine. It's actually not equal, it's the approximately sign here. Now here the cycle consistency loss comes into picture. Whenever we are trying to compare the reconstructed image with the original image to analyze how well our model is performing, there the cycle consistency loss comes into picture. So whenever we are just comparing the original images with the generated images, there we make use of adversarial loss, and when we are comparing the reconstructed images with the original images, then we make use of cycle consistency loss. So another way of writing this is this. As I said, the output of generator F, which is F of G of X, that should be approximately equal to the original image of domain X. So this cycle consistency loss basically helps us to compare with the reconstructed image that we have generated after performing inverse mapping with the original image. Even here the goal of CycleGAN is to reduce the cycle consistency loss, because as the cycle consistency loss will be lower, the perfection of our model will be higher. That is, the original image and the reconstructed image is exactly looking similar, which means the cycle consistency loss is very low. So these were the prominent losses that we make use of in CycleGAN. I hope you might have understand this concept. Now let's go back to the research paper here. Now the main part of this research paper is the architecture of the CycleGAN. Now we have already discussed this figure A here. Let's try to further discuss the figure B and C. This can be discussed correspondingly because both goes hand in hand. So figure B basically represents the forward cycle and figure C represents the backward cycle. So if you just take a look at this figure B here, which is particularly this on your left hand side, you can see here we are mapping the domain X onto domain Y with the help of generator G, and then we are mapping the domain Y back to its original form with the help of generator F. And here the role of cycle consistency loss is to compare the original image from domain X with the reconstructed image of domain X. Whereas if you take the look at this right hand side figure, or you can see the figure C here, it is representing the backward cycle. Here originally you have the images of domain Y which you are mapping onto the domain X with the help of generator F, and then you are trying to reconstruct these images back to its original form of domain Y with the help of generator G. And here the role of cycle consistency is to compare the original image from domain Y with the reconstructed image of domain Y. So both does the same work, just this part of image represents the forward cycle and this part of image represents the backward cycle. And in both the figures, the role of cycle consistency is slightly different. In the first figure, it is trying to compare the original and reconstructed image of domain X, and in the second figure, it is trying to compare the original and reconstructed image of domain Y. So this was the most important part of this research paper about the architecture of the CycleGAN. So this were the three important figures. We already discussed this figure A, and we also discussed this figure B and C. I didn't emphasize much on this discriminator part here because I hope that you might have understood this in the presentation. But here still I would try to say that once more, that this discriminator dy is trying to compare the fake images of zebra with the original images of zebra, that is fake images of domain Y with the original images of domain Y. And here the discriminator dx is trying to compare the original images of horses with the generated images of horses, that is original images of domain X with the fake images of domain X. So this was about the architecture, and moving ahead, we have already discussed about the cycle consistency and the formulation. As you can see here, the G, with the help of generator G, we are mapping X onto Y, and with the help of generator F, we are mapping Y back to X. And we have two adversarial discriminators here, dx and dy. So this was about the formulation. Now talking about the equation of adversarial loss, I won't go much into mathematical part, but this is the basic adversarial loss that we find in every other GAN type. And then we have the cycle consistency loss equation here, which is this. And the main goal of this entire CycleGAN is combining both this cycle consistency loss as well as the adversarial loss. So as you can see, this is the full objective of your CycleGAN, where you are combining the cycle consistency loss of both the generators G and F along with the individual adversarial losses of generator G and generator F. So that was the entire objective of CycleGAN here. And then moving ahead after this, just a minute. So then here you basically have the implementation part. I am going to soon make a video on the implementation of CycleGAN. Right now it's currently under training process. I can even show that to you. Here, as you can see, this is currently running, and practically speaking, it takes a lot of time to train. So once I'm done with this training part, I will also make the implementation video of the CycleGAN. But the basic understanding about the implementation of CycleGAN is that here you just write a single function of generator and a single function of discriminator, which you later call twice, so that you can generate two generators G and F and two discriminators X and Y. And also you make use of convolution layers here in your generator part, whereas you make use of patch GANs in your discriminator part. And you have to give here 200 epochs for training. The number of epochs shouldn't be less than 200, or else it won't get trained, because it requires a larger training epochs and it takes a lot of time to get trained. So that was about the basic idea of implementation. I'm going to soon make a detailed implementation video of the CycleGAN, and this was just the basic intuition, or we can say the background of CycleGAN. And then you have basically the results of that entirely in this research paper here. So I will also provide the link of this research paper in the description box. Go through that. It's a very crystal clear understanding of CycleGAN. So that's it for the video. Thanks for watching.